There is a town in regional New South Wales with a cardiac catheterisation lab, the procedure that opens a blocked artery before it becomes a death. Not in Sydney, not in Newcastle, in a place most Australians know for country music and a January festival. And it sits at number 1 on this list. One town on this list quietly ended the fortnightly drive to the city for cancer treatment. That happened in 2023, and almost nobody outside the region noticed. There is a well-known regional city on this list, a tree changer favourite, profiled regularly in the lifestyle press. But it does not make the top 5. The hospital is not the problem. The price is. Aussie Backroads ranks what the property brochure will not calculate, the distance between your spare bedroom and the hospital that can actually admit you. Tonight, 12 towns, 12 real hospitals, 12 catches. If that is the version of regional Australia you want, subscribe before we start. Number 12, Port Lincoln, South Australia, the far west. Drive to the end of the Eyre Peninsula, at the far end of a long peninsula, no road out the other side, and you reach a working seafood town of about 17,000 people that most mainlanders associate only with great white sharks and tuna farms. Port Lincoln Hospital is the largest facility in Eyre and the far north. 24-hour emergency, maternity, surgery, a renal dialysis unit, medium-level chemotherapy, and a rotating visiting specialist roster that covers orthopedics, ENT, gynecology, vascular, urology, and ophthalmology. That is a serious list for a town under 20,000 people. For a couple managing age-related conditions, a hip that needs watching, a kidney that needs monitoring, most appointments happen locally. The dialysis chair is in Port Lincoln. The chemotherapy chair is there too. What is not there is radiation oncology, and the bed base is small. When a diagnosis needs something the hospital cannot provide, the escalation is a flight to Adelaide, roughly 650 kilometres south. There is no road alternative. The peninsula geography is not a metaphor. It is a physical constraint on the evacuation route. The median sits around $540,000. Port Lincoln does the everyday health work well. It is the serious edge cases that leave and leave by air. The town's economy rides the seafood and aquaculture sector, which means it rises and falls with the catch and the export market. For a retiree on a fixed income, that is less a personal risk than a civic one. When the industry has a bad year, the shops and services feel it. The foreshore is genuinely attractive. The sailing is real. The sense of being at the far end of the country, looking west across Spencer Gulf, is an acquired taste that some people find clarifying. The best hospital on the Eyre Peninsula. Just do not need the one thing it does not have. Number 11. Griffith, New South Wales. The Riverina. There is a moment that defines what a hospital upgrade actually means for the people living around it. Before 2023, a Griffith cancer patient needing radiotherapy drove to Wagga Wagga every fortnight. That is a significant round trip across the Riverina Plain twice a month while managing a cancer diagnosis. In 2023, an on-site radiotherapy unit opened at Griffith Base Hospital. That drive ended. The broader rebuild cost $250 million. The 24-hour emergency department opened in June 2025. The hospital now carries oncology, chemotherapy, radiotherapy, renal dialysis, critical care, surgery, pediatrics, and obstetrics. Population near 21,000, several hours from both Sydney and Melbourne, planted in the middle of irrigated agriculture country producing wine, rice, citrus, and stone fruit. Median house price around $600,000. The question worth sitting with is what the hospital still cannot do. It is a base hospital, not a tertiary centre. The most complex work routes onto Wagga or Sydney, and Wagga is itself not a tertiary hospital. For a retiree managing a complicated condition, that chain of escalation is worth mapping before signing a contract. The climate is honest about what it is: hot, dry, and periodically flooded. The Murrumbidgee River, which gives the irrigation district its character, has also inundated parts of the region in recent memory. Flood zone mapping is not paperwork. It is a property decision. The local Saturday market runs year-round. The Italian-Australian community that built the wine industry left a food culture that does not belong in a town this size. For a buyer who wants a full regional life at a price point the coast abandoned a decade ago, Griffith is worth the research. Just go in, knowing the hospital is new, not yet complete in its scope, and the town's fortunes are tied to one industry's water allocation. A $250 million rebuild that ended one long drive. Now the question is, what it still cannot do. Number 10. Mount Gambier, South Australia, the Limestone Coast. Pull out the map and find the point where South Australia and Victoria almost meet, where the Great Ocean Road fades into limestone country and plantation pine. Mount Gambier sits there, population near 30,000, the state's largest city outside Adelaide's orbit, which is a distinction that sounds impressive until you calculate what orbit actually means here. Mount Gambier and District's Health Service runs a 24-hour emergency department, an oncology unit, maintenance renal dialysis, and a resident and visiting specialist bench, with a co-located private hospital alongside. For a regional centre of this size, the service depth is real. The Blue Lake, a volcanic crater that turns a deep cobalt blue each summer, is not a tourism gimmick. It is genuinely unusual, and locals treat it with the mild pride of people who have stopped noticing the extraordinary. For a retiree managing an ongoing condition, most appointments stay in town. The oncology and dialysis infrastructure means the weekly commitments are local. What is not local is tertiary care. And that is where the geography becomes the catch. Mount Gambier is equidistant from nowhere useful. Adelaide is roughly 4.5 hours north. Melbourne is roughly 4.5 hours east. If a diagnosis escalates past what the local service can manage, you pick a direction and drive. Which state you choose may depend on which specialist you already know, which hospital your GP has a relationship with, or simply which road is open. That is a real decision, and it happens at the worst possible time. The climate is cool and wet. The economy is plantation timber, functional, not particularly dynamic. This is not a town that generates lifestyle profiles in the weekend supplement. It is a working regional city with solid health infrastructure and the most inconvenient geography on the list. The biggest town between two capitals, which is also the problem. Number 9, Burnie, Tasmania, the northwest coast. Here is something worth saying plainly. Radiation oncology in a city of 19,000 people is not the norm in regional Australia. Most towns this size refer cancer patients elsewhere. Burnie does not. The Northwest Regional Hospital carries around 160 beds with intensive care and trauma resuscitation. The co-located Northwest Cancer Centre delivers medical oncology, radiation oncology, and clinical haematology. A retiree in Burnie managing a cancer diagnosis receives treatment in their own city, in their own community, without crossing Bass Strait. That matters in a way that is easy to understate. The regional catchment is closer to 50,000 people, drawing from communities along the northwest coast that would otherwise face very long distances to treatment. Median around $550,000. The working port remains, though the post-industrial character of the town is visible in the streetscape. A mix of the functional and the slowly repurposing, familiar to anyone who has spent time in a regional manufacturing centre navigating the decades after the factory closes. For a retiree from the mainland considering Tasmania, the calculation involves more than one hospital. The isolation is real. Bass Strait is not a minor geographical detail, and interstate specialist access adds a flight. True tertiary care, the rarest interventions, transfers to Launceston or Hobart, and the drive times across the island are significant. Tasmania also carries a documented GP shortage relative to population. Securing a long-term general practitioner before moving is not a precaution, it is a prerequisite. The Saturday community market in the town centre runs through most of the year. For a couple prepared for a cool, wet climate and the particular kind of insularity that island life produces, Burnie offers something that costs far more on the mainland: cancer care without leaving home. Secondary, not tertiary, cancer care in a city of 19,000. It exists, and that is not nothing. Number 8, Mildura, Victoria, the Sunraysia, 5.5 hours from Melbourne, 3.5 from Adelaide. Mildura sits at the point where Victoria, New South Wales and South Australia converge, on the Murray River, in citrus and wine country that has been feeding the inland since irrigation arrived in the 1880s. Population near 35,000, median around $550,000. Mildura-based public hospital runs around 172 beds, a 24-hour emergency department, intensive care, maternity, oncology and renal dialysis, serving as the referral hub for northwest Victoria, far west New South Wales and the South Australian Riverland. If you are a retiree on dialysis 3 sessions a week, the chair is in Mildura. If you are managing chemotherapy, the unit is here. The ICU exists for the events that define retirement health: the cardiac scare, the infection, the fall. The hospital handles them. What it does not handle is the tier above. When a case escalates beyond the base hospital's scope, the decision is Adelaide over Melbourne because 3.5 hours is closer than 5.5. That is not an obvious choice for someone who has lived their whole life in Victoria. It is the kind of logistics that only becomes real when the ambulance is deciding. Picture an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. The river path along the Murray, the ibis in the red gums, the Italian bakeries on Langtree Avenue that have been there since the migrant workers who built the irrigation channels stayed and put down roots. Mildura has more cultural depth than its distance from everything would suggest. The food and wine region generates genuine activity. The river is not decorative. The summer heat is not a lifestyle feature to be managed. Days above 40 degrees are routine from December through February. Anyone who has not spent a sunraysia summer should visit in January before committing. The flood map is also a real document. The Murray has history and insurance reflects it. The Murray gives it everything except proximity to help. Number 7, Orange, New South Wales, the Central West. Here is the famous entry. Orange has been in the lifestyle press for a decade. Cool climate wines, autumn colour, heritage streetscape, cafe culture in a regional city at altitude. It attracts tree changers from Sydney who want the seasons and the drive home. All of that is true, and none of it is why it is on this list. Orange Health Service at Bloomfield is a major regional referral hospital. The Central West Cancer Care Centre delivers on-site radiation and chemotherapy. The renal dialysis service is in town. For the conditions that define retirement health, Orange keeps almost everything local. Sydney is 3.5 hours for the cases that sit beyond what Bloomfield can manage. Possible, not comfortable, but not a weekly reality for most patients. For a couple trying to make superannuation stretch across 20 years, this is also where the honest read begins. Orange's median has run hard, around $730,000, the dearest on this list. The gap between what Orange offers and what Orange costs has widened every year the lifestyle press has profiled it. The hospital is the best argument for moving there. The price is the argument against. What the brochure does not calculate, a cold, central west winter at 1,000 metres where the frost arrives in June and the heating bill is not a rounding error. The autumn colour is real. The July mornings are also real. Still, this is the list about the distance between the spare bedroom and the hospital. On that measure, Orange is very good. On the measure of affordability, it is the worst performer in the countdown. Those two facts do not cancel each other. They live together. The finest hospital on the list, at the worst price on the list. If you can afford it, it works. Still coming in this next stretch. There is a town where a medical school just opened next door to the hospital, and the doctors are arriving, not leaving. That changes the equation for anyone thinking 20 years ahead. Number 6, Warrnambool, Victoria, the southwest coast. Since 2016, a Warrnambool retiree with a cancer diagnosis has received radiotherapy without leaving the coast. That is the single fact that separates Warrnambool from most of the coastal towns that attract retirees, and it does not appear in the property listings. The Southwest Regional Cancer Centre opened its radiotherapy service in that year. Warrnambool Base Hospital, run by Southwest Healthcare, carries a 24-hour emergency department, day oncology delivering chemotherapy and immunotherapy, renal medicine and dialysis, surgery and maternity. And it is midway through a $384 million redevelopment. The hospital is getting better while people live there, which is a different proposition from moving somewhere and hoping the services hold. Population near 35,000. Median around $625,000. The coast here, Logan's Beach, the Whale Nursery, the Breakwater, is genuinely extraordinary. The Great Ocean Road begins somewhere nearby, and the 12 Apostles draw international visitors year-round. Warrnambool itself is a working city, not a tourist village, which is why the services exist. It has a functioning economy, a university campus, a decent high street. For a retiree whose retirement involves staying healthy close to family in Melbourne or Geelong, the qualitative drive time is several hours, not a casual trip, but manageable for a specialist appointment that goes beyond what Warrnambool can provide. Tertiary escalation still travels. The Regional Cancer Centre handles a great deal. The complex cardiac case is a different story. The coastal premium pricing and the tourist season pressure on local costs are the financial context. This is a town that filled its lifestyle reputation before it filled its hospital, and the hospital has been catching up ever since. $384 million of catching up. It is worth knowing the process is not finished. Number 5, Bunbury, Western Australia, the southwest. 2 hours south of Perth, the shortest drive to a capital city that any town on this list offers. That proximity is part of the Bunbury calculation, and it cuts both ways. Bunbury Regional Hospital, co-located with St John of God Bunbury, runs a comprehensive cancer care centre, coronary care, renal dialysis, and a deep specialist bench. It is the largest health hub in Western Australia south of Perth. Greater Bunbury population near 76,000. Median around $760,000, the priciest entry on the Western Australian side. For anyone managing a condition that requires regular specialist oversight, the combination of the local hospital and a 2-hour Perth option changes the risk profile. What Bunbury cannot do, Perth probably can. And 2 hours is a different kind of distance from 5. Most retirees on this list are facing drives of 3 to 5 hours to a capital. Bunbury cuts that in half. The co-located public and private hospitals mean the specialist bench is deeper than either could sustain alone. Which door you walk through matters financially. Some services sit behind the private threshold, the gap payment, the extras cover, the decision about what you can afford when you are already committed to the postcode. That is worth understanding before buying, not after. The beach suburbs south of the city, the surf coast, the wine country of the Margaret River region an hour further down. The lifestyle around Bunbury is what it is. Mediterranean climate, genuinely good infrastructure, the kind of regional city that has grown past the point of feeling provisional. Western Australia's best regional health hub, 2 hours from the one that beats it. For a buyer who wants proximity to Perth without Perth's price, the trade sits there clearly. Number 4, Wagga Wagga, New South Wales. The Riverina, largest inland city in New South Wales, population near 70,000. Several hours from Sydney, Melbourne or Canberra, roughly equidistant from 3 capitals, in a way that sounds like a weakness until you think about which family members live where. Wagga Wagga Base Hospital is a regional referral hospital covering cardiology, renal, gastroenterology, orthopedics, obstetrics, and psychiatry. That is a broad specialist bench by any regional measure. But the detail that changes the long-term picture sits next door. A UNSW medical school opened in 2025, co-located with the hospital. The doctors being trained there will do their clinical rotations in Wagga Wagga. Some of them will stay. The supply of specialists in regional New South Wales has historically been a retention problem. People train in the city and stay in the city. A medical school next door to the regional hospital is a structural intervention in that problem. It does not guarantee anything, but it changes what the postcode looks like in 15 years. Here is the ordinary daily version of what that means. The GP, who trained partly in Wagga, is more likely to have a relationship with the specialist at the base hospital, which means the referral is faster and the communication is better. That is not a brochure promise. That is how medical ecosystems actually function. Median around $720,000, second dearest on the list. The rarest escalation still means a long drive to Sydney, Melbourne or Canberra. The hospital is strong but not tertiary. For a retiree whose children are scattered across 3 states, the geography is genuinely useful. For a retiree whose specialist is in Sydney and has been for 20 years, the distance is real. Volunteers at the Botanic Gardens, a busy farmers market on the riverbank most Saturdays, a genuine university town culture, Wagga reads as inhabited, not just serviced. The medical school is the reassurance the real estate agent never mentions. Coming at number 3, the cheapest town in the strong hospital tier on this entire list. It just doubled its dialysis chairs, under $500,000. Number 3, Shepparton, Victoria, the Goulburn Valley, 2.5 hours north of Melbourne. Population near 52,000, median around $490,000. That is the cheapest house price in the tier of towns on this list, with a principal referral hospital. And in a countdown built around the premise that hospital infrastructure and affordability can coexist, Shepparton is where that premise is demonstrated most completely. Goulburn Valley Health is the principal referral hospital for the Hume region, freshly redeveloped. The Peter Copulus Cancer and Wellness Centre is on site. The renal dialysis unit was recently expanded, doubled, to 16 chairs. A rural clinical school operates alongside the hospital, which performs the same function as the medical school in Wagga. It keeps clinicians in the region. 16 dialysis chairs. For a retiree whose treatment schedule is 3 sessions a week, every week without interruption, that number is not abstract. That is the local capacity to manage the condition that most determines daily life. In a freshly rebuilt unit, in a town under $500,000, 2.5 hours from Melbourne. The summers in the Goulburn Valley are long and genuinely hot. This is irrigation country, stone fruit and dairy and the Murray-Darling system. And the January heat is the same heat that bakes the orchard. 2.5 hours to Melbourne is the distance for the tertiary escalation that Shepparton cannot manage locally. And it is a real distance. Some parts of the city carry socio-economic strain that no listing photograph includes. Shepparton is not a polished lifestyle destination. It is a working regional city with a recently upgraded hospital and a price point that the rest of this list cannot match. For a buyer whose priority is clinical infrastructure over postcode gloss, the value calculation at number 3 is the clearest on the list. This is the affordability payoff of the whole countdown. 16 dialysis chairs and a cancer centre under $500,000. Aussie Backroads runs this list because nobody else does. Not the property portals, not the tourism boards. The drive to the hospital is the number that ends a retirement, and these towns shorten it. If that is the version of regional Australia worth knowing, subscribe. Number 2, Dubbo, New South Wales, the Western Plains. A newly rebuilt major rural referral hospital, somewhere around 5 hours west of Sydney, in a city of 43,000 people on the Macquarie River. Dubbo Base Hospital is a brand new building carrying an emergency department, intensive care, coronary care, the Western Cancer Centre with on-site radiation and chemotherapy, a renal dialysis hub that supplies satellite units across Western New South Wales, alongside oncology, obstetrics, paediatrics and psychiatry, median around $635,000. What that combination means in practice: a Dubbo retiree receives radiation oncology, chemotherapy and dialysis, all three, in a brand new facility, without driving to Sydney. The 5-hour drive to Sydney is there when it is needed. For the most complex cases, it is a real constraint. But the daily and weekly appointments that define retirement health, the dialysis sessions, the chemotherapy cycles, the monitoring, happen locally. The dialysis hub function is worth noting specifically. Dubbo does not just serve Dubbo, it runs the satellite units that keep dialysis accessible in towns further west that could not sustain a unit of their own. The Orana region's renal patients are, in a real administrative sense, held together from Dubbo. The climate is hot and dry. The economy is regional services and agriculture, not a single-sector town, but not a diversified urban economy either. A retiree who needs the cultural and retail density of a large city will find Dubbo functional but not stimulating. The question this town answers well is a different one. Can I get the treatment I need without the drive? For most retirement health events, yes. A full cancer centre, a dialysis hub, a brand new building, around $635,000. The title of this video almost fits. Number 1, Tamworth, New South Wales, the New England. Most Australians know Tamworth for 1 week in January, when the city of 64,000 becomes the country music capital for a festival that draws hundreds of thousands of visitors from across the continent. The rest of the year, Tamworth runs the largest hospital in New South Wales outside the Sydney-Newcastle-Wollongong corridor, and almost nobody outside the New England region has thought about that fact. 282 beds, a 24-hour emergency department and major trauma referral centre, intensive and coronary care, the Northwest Cancer Centre, delivering radiation and chemotherapy on site, renal medicine, maternity, ophthalmology and orthopaedics. And one thing that no other town on this list has: an interventional cardiac catheterisation lab. The catheterisation lab is the procedure that opens a blocked artery. It is the intervention that turns a heart attack from a death sentence into a recovery. In a capital city, it is assumed. In regional Australia, its absence is the gap that kills people in the 4-hour ambulance run. Tamworth has one. A Tamworth retiree with a cardiac event does not wait for a flight to Sydney, does not wait for the ambulance to cover 400 kilometres. The intervention happens locally. No other town on this list can say that. Most of the runners-up have a strong hospital, dialysis, chemotherapy, emergency care. Tamworth has those, and then the one piece of infrastructure that sits above them. Put yourself in the practical position. You are 68 years old, you have had a stent placed once before, and you are choosing a retirement address. The catheterisation lab changes the risk calculation in a way that no price comparison resolves. It is the reason the median of $650,000, which is higher than some towns on this list, is not the deciding number. That said, the catch is real. 4 to 5 hours to Sydney or Newcastle for the genuinely rare tertiary escalation. Hot summers, the New England tablelands at altitude, but Tamworth sits lower in the valley, and the January heat is not the cool climate relief the elevation might suggest. Fast price growth, more than 20% in a year, means the affordability window is compressing. Anyone who looked at Tamworth 2 years ago and waited will find the number has moved. The Peel River runs through town. The Lions Club meets at the bowling club on the first Tuesday of each month. The Saturday morning market at the showground draws from a wide district. Tamworth functions as a regional hub in the complete sense. The specialist visits come here, the young doctors train here, the surrounding smaller towns look here for their services. Tamworth is number 1 on this list for one reason that is specific and one reason that is structural. The specific reason is the cardiac catheterisation lab. The intervention that stops the most common serious event in retirement from becoming fatal, available locally at 4 to 5 hours from a capital. The structural reason is that every other piece of hospital infrastructure, radiation oncology, dialysis, trauma, ICU, is already here too. No other town on this list combines those elements at this price in a city this functional. The gap between Tamworth and the runners-up is not the price and not the distance. It is what the hospital can actually do when it matters most. In regional Australia, the retirement risk that nobody prices into the move is the distance between the spare bedroom and the hospital that can admit you, treat you, and handle the serious event when it arrives. Every town on this list shortens that distance for something that matters. Which gap you can live with is the decision only you can make. If you had to choose between the best hospital and the lowest price, where would you draw the line? Drop your answer below. Next time, 12 towns where the pension actually stretches, affordability without the hospital trade-off, and what you give up to get it.